the rates of interest on credit cards are higher than you would find on student loans and mortgages and car loans.
Yeah, because you hear a lot of talk about that in the media too, that it's really high interest rates and people struggle to try to pay them down.
That's right. The student loans are almost outpacing the credit cards at this point.
Right. So from a tax standpoint though, can you deduct the credit card interest?
Well, generally credit cards taken out by individuals are going to be personal interest. And so personal interest by and large is not a deductible expense. The only way you can get a deduction is if there is a way to trace that interest or the debt that you spent the money on to a trade or business expense.
So if it's a credit card, like a MasterCard or a Visa or something that I use for my business purchases, I could use that interest as a deduction from my business income.
It's possible.
Okay, not always.
Not always.
It never is always in taxes.
Never always.
Never always in taxes. But what about student loans?
Well, student loans, you know, they're a necessity for a lot of folks. You've got to you pay for your college. Generally, if we're talking about tax deductibility, there is a deduction for student loan interest with certain limitations.
So student loan debt is sometimes a necessity for you to pay for your education, right?
Absolutely.
So you just may not have any other way to get your college education. So a student loan is sort of like investing in yourself.
Absolutely, that's a great point.
So the mortgage is always collateralized by the real estate. So if you default on the mortgage, they're going to take the real estate with you. And you have 2 or 3 different kinds. You have your home mortgage, which I think everybody's pretty familiar with. It's on your principal residence. It's the place where you live, you know. And for the most part, that interest is totally deductible.
Right.
Okay. For the most part. And again, you have to be on the mortgage itself. You have to be legally obligated to pay that mortgage in order to deduct that interest.
That's right.
So with mortgages, from a financial standpoint, you've also got a wide variety of repayment plans that you could do. You could do 10 years or 15 years or 30 years. You know, obviously from a financial or an economic policy, the shorter the term, the better you are.
Right.
You know, it just makes more sense to pay your debt off quicker.
If you can
afford the payments.
Flow.
Right.
So you mentioned mortgages can come in many forms. You talked about a primary residence, and also there are options for folks that invest in real estate as well.
Right. So if you own some rental property, or if you want to own some rental property, you can take a mortgage on that, and you can deduct that mortgage interest from the rental income related to that property. Right. Or you could just maybe have a vacant lot or an investment property. And again, you can normally deduct that mortgage interest.
Right.
There is an assumption there that you do itemized deductions, and so that is kind of a basic premise. But for the most part, you could deduct that mortgage interest.
Right, so it sounds like there's, if you're looking for tax deductions, and depending on the type of property you're investing in, there should be some way to obtain a tax deduction for the interest that you pay.
For the most part, there always is. The mortgage interest is one of the basic itemized deductions that most people use.
Okay.
And again, you know, it depends on whether it's rental property or investment property or your primary residence or even a home equity line of credit. That may also be deductible depending on the amount that you have outstanding. There are a few times when car loans are deductible, but again, it has to be a business use vehicle. And I don't mean you run to the post office once a week to take the mail. That's not enough business use to be able to deduct that interest expense. But if you've got, perhaps you're a traveling salesperson or perhaps it's a company vehicle, for the most part, you can deduct that interest, again, as long as it's related to a business activity.
That's right.
But for your own personal vehicle, there's no deduction available. And so again, from an economic standpoint, you want to try to find the best deal you can. You know, cars depreciate quickly, so you'd hate to have a long-term debt on an asset that you're not going to have for a long term.